All right, Stardate 3038.2. So this is going to be the last journal entry for the CDT and for the Triple Crown, which is kind of crazy. So yeah, if you listen to the last one, you'll know that I ended up in hospital because of a hemiplegic migraine that led to dehydration between Silver City and Lordsburg, and ended up back in Boston. So yeah, so hung out in Boston for, I don't know, a couple weeks, let myself heal up, let my knee heal up actually, which, I would have hiked on with it all busted up, but it was nice to have a fresh knee to go back. So I jumped on a Southwest flight back to El Paso. And I realized that was going to be it when I got back to Crazy Cook, or when I got to Crazy Cook at the end of the trail. That was going to be when I got my Triple Crown, and that would be the photo. So I needed a crown to wear. So I looked for like the Burger King crown. I looked for a Burger King in the airports to get one of their cardboard crowns. Couldn't find any anywhere, which I was really bummed about, because I wanted to copy my AT hiking partner's Triple Crown photo. Timber, when she finished the CDT, has this like great photo with the Burger King thing. And I just didn't get ahead of it enough. But on the flight, I saw the stewardesses congratulate a couple for getting married. And she gave each of them a Southwest crown, so the airline like branding, and it was pretty much exactly the same thing, almost exactly like the Burger King crown. So on the connecting flight, I had the presence of mind the next flight to flag down a stewardess and ask about it. Say like, "Hey, I saw this on the other flight. Do you guys have those on this flight?" And she said, unfortunately, she didn't have one. But later, right before we landed, she surprised me, and she was like, "I found one." So that was great. So I had the prop for the photo, and I had everything I needed at that point. So made it to El Paso and took a really nice cruisy 3-hour Amtrak to Lordsburg, which is the little town I would have ended up in if I hadn't been taken to hospital in the previous section. It's a little dusty town in the middle of a desert. It just feels like the middle of nowhere, really flat. Just there's nothing there. It's like sand with some buildings. So I wandered around between the Dollar General and like a half-stocked supermarket and the Family Dollar, looking for a lighter and some rubbing alcohol for my stove that I use as fuel for my stove. And then I checked into the Econo Lodge, which is where all the hikers apparently stayed. It was the clerk's second day, so she kind of made a mess of the check-in, double charged me, and put me in a room that smelled like hikers, really bad. Body odor and cigarettes, kind of gross. And to top it off, I got some terrible Mexican food at the place next door, next to the gas station. And the gas station actually had better food. They had hot dogs. And yeah, so let's see. Spent the night there and spent the next day sewing up the arm on my hoodie where the EMT had cut it to insert the IV. So I spent a bit of time sewing that up and then designing the Triple Crown. So I used the white backside of the Southwest crown, and I got some colored Sharpies that I found at the Family Dollar. And I had to sort of design a PCT logo because the logo for that trail kind of sucks. And came out good. So I found a good restaurant finally in that town. Had looked closed. I think it actually is trying to look closed for some reason. It's mostly locals in there. And I grabbed dinner and a breakfast burrito for the next morning. So next morning, I'd arranged a ride, and I was going with 3 other hikers. So I met 3 guys about my age from North Carolina, and they were aiming to section hike the CDT. And they were going to do the desert section as their first section. So, this is where I was ending at the terminus, and it's where they were starting. So they were going to hike north over who knows how many years. but they were super green. They looked like they were straight out of REI or some gear shop. I didn't have the heart to tell them that there was literally nothing that they were that was on their backs or that they were using that was really going to be useful to them long term as a proper thru hiker, except maybe their food. And all the proper gear really needs to be mail ordered or made yourself. It's almost impossible to find something for sale at a retail place that's any good. So we all jumped in the CDT shuttle. It's run by a nonprofit that showed up at 7 a.m. and took us out on some seriously beat up dirt roads to the Crazy Cook Monument. It's called that because apparently a cook went crazy and murdered someone and then ran into Mexico to avoid justice in the U.S. There's a little sort of carved rock that tells the story. So anyways, we got there around 11 a.m., which was later than we were hoping. But the driver was great, and he actually, in the end, drove us the extra 2 miles all the way to the border that he wasn't supposed to. And he's not supposed to because the Crazy Cook Monument's part of a new NDA, which stands for National Defense Area, that the government set up. It's basically sort of like a border, they're building the border, and it's just off limits to everyone. If you do want to go there, it requires that you have a real ID, and you send that and a passport photo to Fort Huachuca, I think is how you pronounce it, and they do a background check and send you back like a laminated pass. And that's only available to U.S. citizens, so international hikers actually can't get to the border anymore to start their hike, which is really a bummer. Especially if there's hikers, and there were, that were finishing after 5-6 months, and to be denied that final sort of like moment of victory actually at the end of the trail would be pretty crushing. There's a guy down there named Tim that says he can get around some of those rules because he's a vet and has access, but it sounds pretty dodgy, and you gotta kind of like give him a bunch of money on the side and stuff. So anyway, I'll say here that the goal for me was to hike the entire CDT southbound, which I did, except for this last section. In this case, I was going down to the border, and I was going to hike north back to Lordsburg. And the reason for that is it would have cost me $550 to get a ride back from Crazy Cook. So if I'd hiked down and got a ride back, since I'd have to pay, because I'd be by myself and I'd have to pay for the whole shuttle, just for me. But because there's these 3 guys, and there's like some reason during the weekday, it was only going to cost me $80 to get a ride to Crazy Cook. So I decided that was, it was just too much of a difference. And, I was just going to hike this last section in the reverse direction, and that's fine. And it ended up being really cool for lots of reasons. But it means I didn't technically end my hike at the Crazy Cook Monument. I would end it in Lordsburg. But it's still the sort of like the spiritual end point. So I wanted to celebrate there when we got dropped off before hiking north to Lordsburg. And I took a bunch of photos at the monument with my, fancy homemade Southwest Triple Crown paper crown, and ate my breakfast burrito. Took a bunch of time just at the monument, soaking in the fact that my 10-year-long, 10,000-mile, Triple Crown hiking career was almost over, and then I headed off into the desert. It was about 80 miles back to Lordsburg, that section, and caught up pretty quickly to the guys from North Carolina about noon. They were looking for shade. They didn't have umbrellas, but they seemed okay. It was beautiful and serious desert hiking, no water anywhere, partly because we were told that the farmers on the Mexican side of the border pump all the wells dry from the reservoirs for their farming on that side, which is why they have some caches. So eventually got into a huge wash, which is basically like, what's the name for it? Canyon. It's basically like a canyon that's been created by water over, I don't know, hundreds of years probably running through the desert. But it's just strange when you're in the desert and there's no water there. So when they get really torrential rain, the water, sort of scars the land and just goes deeper and deeper and deeper. And it turns into these washes that you end up walking in. So got in there, and I ran into a hiker going south. CT hiker, her name was Piper, and she was awesome. And I recognized her name right away from the comments on my guide, because, I'd been leaving water comments all the way down, and she amended some of them. If it turned out that the water wasn't there, a week or two later when she got there, she'd leave a comment. So a woman probably in her 60s, in a colorful hiking dress. And then, same thing. When I told her I was Raphael, she was like, "Oh, no way," sort of immediately perked up and was so appreciative of all the comments that I'd left, which let her plan for her hike. So in a lot of places, she didn't need to carry any water at all. Which means you're less likely to have an injury and you can hike longer. So, she's really thankful, except for one. That's what she said, except for one. So apparently she'd been counting on one water source in a tire that I said was full. And when she got there, it had been drained by the farmer. So she was a little grumpy about that. But and anyways, wished her luck and congratulated her. And then I made it to the first water cache. So the nonprofit CDT organization that runs the shuttle, they also fill these metal boxes. They're kind of like bear boxes, with huge, thick plastic jugs of water that you can barely lift. And on our drive, our driver left these like CDT tags for us inside the first one, which is cool. I opened that up and there's a couple little presents in there. One was a little plastic bidet that you screw onto the end, of a standard water bottle. That seemed a little bit weird to waste water in the desert like that. So I left the bidet there for somebody else and signed the notebook. And I hung out there for a while. I waited for those 3 guys from North Carolina to show up. Just wanted to make sure they were okay. And I'd said I'd wait for them. And Tim also showed up, the guy I was telling you about who, the vet that can break the rules. So I chatted to him a bunch about, he's got this sort of conflict going with the CDT nonprofit that he used to work for. 'Cause, he's kind of more of a rule breaker and they're very much following the rules. So, it's not a great situation, but it's good for the hikers to have both of them out there. So, we want to be supported as much as we can. So really hoped, that was mainly my message to him. I was like, I hope you guys can resolve this. He's been looking after the CDT hikers out there for more than 10 years and really just loved his job. He drives all the way out from El Paso to mostly work on the road. Like he gets a shovel out and fills in all the potholes. So you can actually drive out there. Our driver on the shuttle had said, quote, "No one maintains the roads out here." And that's not true. Tim seems to do it all by himself. And he also checks the caches and keeps them full if they're getting low. Even the CDT ones, and gives rides out to exhausted hikers. So he's really like the trail angel to end all trail angels. In the very dangerous section, he's making sure that people are okay. So anyway, it was nice to meet him, and it was towards the end of the day. Sun was going down. I walked another 3 or 4 miles down the road and camped in a high spot in a wash, with a windmill close by that was supposed to have water. And it was a beautiful night. Next day, I met another southbound CDT hiker, and this was why it was cool to hike that last section north. It was because I was meeting hikers for the first time, who, I had been technically hiking with all of that time, but had never actually met. So just to hike one section in the opposite direction gives you that opportunity to almost get like X-ray vision into the trail and see like everyone who's actually there. So yeah, I met Flowers, really quiet, nice guy, kind of looked like a praying mantis, super long, skinny legs, looked kind of malnourished. And then also this guy named Hamburglar, who is, he was totally like a character. And both were, just like Piper, really appreciative of all the comments that I'd left. And Hamburglar especially was just like, "Oh my God, you're Raphael!" It was amazing. We were in Colorado and talking, and we saw somebody leaving comments on the way down, and they were just really happy again because it meant they didn't have to carry water for almost all of New Mexico, which is a desert, and it's just a luxury. So it was really cool to know that all the work that I'd put into those comments, meant something to at least a few people. So, So anyways, Flowers was kind of funny. He thought he was the first one down, but there was other people in the logs even before, I'd put my name in the logs. And it's always the same story. Everyone thinks they're the first one there, or they think they're the only one hiking in the entire state. When in reality, there's actually a lot of us in there. We're just all moving the same speed in the same direction, so we never see each other. And another cool thing, when I was talking to Hamburglar, he saw the crown, the Southwest crown I'd made. I had it sort of dangling off the back of my backpack so it wouldn't get crushed. And he was like, "Can I have that?" Because he was getting his Triple Crown too. And I really liked the crown that I made. I thought it came out good, and I didn't want to let it go. But then I immediately realized like how great it would be if it got used for more than one person. So I was like, yes, of course you can have it. And we talked about the crown a little bit, and he had the idea that after he used it for his photo shoot, he'd put it in the first water cache box, which is rainproof. So anyone kind of getting their Triple Crown who checked that last water cache could see it and use it for their photo shoot. So I really hope that more than just me and him end up using it for the photo shoot. That would be so cool if it had sort of lived on. And I have confirmed since, talking to another couple hikers, that I don't know who, but someone put it in a plastic bag to help preserve it a little bit. So that's pretty cool. So after that, I had a fairly uneventful couple days hiking back to Lordsburg. I got a little lost once and had to jump back on a highway, follow a highway. And while hiking there, a Border Patrol agent stopped me. It was kind of funny the way it happened. He sort of slowed way down and pulled to the side of the road, but it was like 100 yards away from me. Almost looked like he was, stalking me from a distance like a lion or something would. And I just, walked straight up to his car and was friendly and chatty, and he chilled out pretty quickly. But he was telling me some stories. Apparently, some folks crossing the border like to dress up like thru hikers, and they stick to the CDT, and they try to sneak by and disguise that way. So anyway, moved on, and I walked all day until sundown. That was a solid 28-mile day. That was a good day. And I spent another night in a wash, which you're really actually not supposed to do in case it rains. You can have a pretty rude awakening. But I checked the weather on my satellite device, and it said it was going to be a completely clear night. And the washes are also out of the wind, and I found a really big bush. So a super windy night, but the spot that I got in the wash was, no wind at all. So it was just too good to pass up. So yeah, set up, cleaned off, and had a really nice, restful night. I woke up very early though the next day, like 4 a.m. and was, I don't know, I just felt like getting up. So I just got up and I did some super fun morning night hiking. And I've done tons of night hiking before. I love it. But I don't think I'd done it in the morning before. And I discovered that the CDT signs in the desert, there's not many signs on the CDT in like any of the states, but there were signs in most of the desert because you can get lost really, really easily. And I noticed that they're reflective because I had my headlamp on, and with a good headlamp, you can actually see the signs like, maybe a quarter mile away, maybe not quite that far, but far away. And then you can just kind of beeline it towards the next sign. So it was easier to follow at night than during the day, actually. So the rest of that day was a ton of super empty, flat desert with some storms looming. There was a hurricane out in the Pacific Ocean, which was apparently sending huge rain clouds our way. So I pushed until sunset again. I thought I should just kind of get out of the desert if it really was going to dump on us. And that ended up being another 28-mile day with unexpectedly good water sources all along, not just the caches. So those 2 long days in a row, those extra miles were doing some damage to my knee, and the toenail on my left foot started to turn purple, probably because my feet were sort of swollen from the heat coming up through the desert. So I found a tree that looked good at first, but it was kind of a hot spot for local animals and birds, also a little bit in a wash. But I was super tired. I couldn't find a better spot, so I threw down there. There were 3 huge bird's nests in the tree, and some sort of incredibly loud bird was really annoyed at me for being there. And a local bull was also super annoyed and yelled at me for an hour or so before wandering off. But I had earplugs and managed to pass a pretty nice night. Didn't get washed away. So the last day in the desert was cloudy and flat and uneventful. So yeah, not much to talk about there. As I was walking into Lordsburg at the end, I thought I should try to get a ride to Silver City that day and avoid spending another night there. I just thought I'd spend the night there, but then I was like, oh man, I could just, maybe jump in a car now and get up to Silver City. So got on the phone and was able to lock down a ride, but only for the following day. But while I was on the phone, I passed another pretty serious-looking hiker heading into the desert who was in sandals, and I wish I'd stopped anyway and talked to him. Looked like a really interesting guy in the sandals. I wanted to ask about the sandals. So I spent another night at the Econo Lodge and asked for a different non-smelly room, and I got it, which was great. So to recap a bit, at that point, I'd hiked all the miles on the CDT, except for the miles I'd missed between Silver City and Lordsburg when I was evacuated. That section was 80 miles total, and I had 50 miles left of that section. So I'd hiked 30 miles, and I still had 50 miles. So to get those 50 miles, I had to repeat the 30 that I'd already done, and I could do it either going north and end in Silver City, then try to get a ride back to Lordsburg, since that's where the bus and train connections to El Paso and the airport were. Or I could get a ride the next day to Silver City and hike south, which is the direction I'd hiked the entire trail like I was talking about before, except for Crazy Cook. And in that case, I could just grab a bus or a train after walking back into Lordsburg. So it seemed kind of like a no-brainer to hike it south. So the next morning, the same guy who drove us all out to Crazy Cook showed up in his family car with a bunch of baby stuff in the back seat. I'm trying to remember his name. I keep trying to remember his name, but I can't seem to remember his name. Let's see if I have it here. Don't have it here. So we had a nice chat driving up Route 90 to Silver City, and he dumped me at the Palace Hotel, which is like a cheapo hiker haven in that town. And I spent the day resupplying and tending to my purple toenail. The plan with my toenail was to buy sock liners, really, so they're really thin, and hike in those to reduce the volume of my foot in the shoe. And I cut the toenail way back so it wouldn't, bang against the front of my shoe. And it worked. That plan worked. I didn't end up losing my toenail, at least not yet. So in any case, that was a super rainy day, and I had a great dinner at the Little Toad Brewery. I found a ride out to the trailhead with a local trail angel the next morning. So that would save me repeating at least 11 miles of that 30 miles I was having to repeat. And that was a road walk, so that was great. So the next morning I jumped in the trail angel's car with another CDT hiker, so it was cool to meet him. And they were both super interested in why I was evacuated the first time and and actually knew about me. I was sort of like trail famous a little bit for being evacuated, and also for the water comments. I guess people knew the water comment guy had been evacuated. You know, they wanted to know, was it a bad water source? Was my food bad? Was it just a normal migraine triggered by something else? So I actually had no idea. I was a little bit worried that it was triggered by something I ate, and I just resupplied in Silver City from exactly the same stores I'd eaten out of the first time, which was maybe not the smartest move. So I was a little worried about that. Didn't want it to happen again. But the smart thing I did was I carried 2 full liters of water out of town, so I didn't have to take water from the first 2 water sources, that might have actually triggered the migraine. So that way I would just carry past all of those potentially dodgy water sources. So anyway, the trail angel dropped us off, and I hunkered down to eat a burrito while the other hiker took off, and I didn't end up seeing him again. And I had just a super strange day, hiking, retracing my steps, determining how far I'd hiked with my full-blown migraine, where I laid down, where I was evacuated from. Those were all kind of like spots I was coming across on a, different, much sunnier day. And being there triggered some memories that, I don't know, I'd just been too out of it or something. But I remembered I'd actually taken a powder flavor packet that had been offered from the hunter I'd met in the Gila Valley. And at the time when he was offering it to me, he gave me some like tuna fish and a bunch of other stuff. And I told him I was allergic to caffeine. And he actually, pointed that out and was like, oh, that has caffeine in it. And then he took it, I thought he took it away and replaced it with one that he said didn't have caffeine. And that's my most powerful trigger for migraine. But yeah, I think they just probably all had caffeine in them. But anyway, on the trail also I noticed some roots that I'd tripped over while the sheriff's deputy was taking me out. Like that was a pretty clear memory. And then lo and behold, there was my water bottle, the one that got left behind and the one the EMTs wouldn't let me drink out of. And some other hiker, I guess they'd found it out there and put it under a rock at the trail junction where the dirt road, was that the Jeep met us. So, so from that point on, it was all new miles. So, so after that point, we were really lucky that trail angels were looking after the water caches. By that point, if I'd hiked it actually back, when I'd been evacuated, there might not have been water caches there. But by that point, there were. So that was actually, a good side effect of going in there later. And I almost didn't have to drink any standing water in that entire section or water from livestock tanks. So let's see. Yeah, so that first day I was going to push it a bit, but I found a wonderful tenting spot around 6 p.m. near a good water source. So I threw down there. And I was getting a little bit of a headache too, and I didn't want to take any chances. And I took 2 Aleve before going to bed as a preventative. So that was the plan, to do that every night, just, so it would be actually impossible to get another migraine while sleeping. At least while I was out there hiking, you can't take Aleve every night. That's not good for you. But, at least this was a preventative for that. So yeah, the next morning I decided didn't have enough water, grabbed some water from the pools nearby, and treated it with tablets. That's the first time I'd done that I'd, used tablets ever since my first day on the Appalachian Trail in 2015. Filtering is just so much faster, and having to wait 30 to 40 minutes to drink when you're really thirsty, it's just not going to happen most of the time. So while I was getting water, another hiker showed up in his 50s. Real nice guy. Said his name was Commander Valerian. Super talkative guy from Costa Rica. He was a vet, and he said there was another guy behind him called Jerry. They were hiking together. So it was really good to know there were other hikers around. And Jerry showed up, and they kind of moved on while I finished packing up. And yeah, that was just a great morning of hiking. I ended up passing both Commander and Jerry after a little bit and summited the last mountain on the CDT that I would summit. It was about a 1,500-foot climb, really beautiful, beautiful misty morning, which is weird for the desert, which is why it's so kind of cool. I met a day hiker on the way down who confirmed that it was pretty unusual. And, he was also like, yeah, it's like such a nice day. So got down to a parking lot and started looking for a water cache that was supposed to be there. I really needed it and wasn't finding it immediately. And a guy in a white Prius, I guess he was kind of watching me. And so he drove over, and it turned out that his car was full of trail magic. He had kind of given up waiting for hikers, some guy named Bill from Colorado. So he opened up the trunk, and he was totally set up. He had like fruit and cookies and Snicker bars and clean water. He said he was about to leave, and he'd been looking for a couple days for hikers to help. I told him to stick around for Commander and Jerry to show up. Let's see. And yeah, so I waited for them too. Yeah, and when they came down, they were so happy when they rolled in. I was losing a bit of time because Commander was so talkative early in the morning and that, so I just kind of, took off. I did eventually find the water cache that was supposed to be there and connected with some dirt roads on the side of a hill, and got to a second water cache a few miles down, which was unexpected. And yeah, just again, so awesome that the Trail Angels kept those water caches stocked because that section was super dry. And I pushed hard for another 28-mile day and just about got there, but the sun was going down, and I needed to find a place pretty quick because, it's much... You can night hike, but it's just hard to find a quality place to put your tent down in the dark. So I almost stayed in a little dilapidated barn on the side of the road, but read some comments that it was full of bats and the bats would poop on you at night. I guess someone else had discovered that the hard way. So I wound down a valley on a dirt road and past a few ranchers and found a great spot at the bottom of a hill on the side of the road behind some brush next to this beautiful large tree that was, clearly where cows normally stay. So I kind of cleared a spot. And, you have to really kind of clear a lot of cow patties out there. It's, you'd think it was kind of gross, but they don't smell bad, and they're just like all dried up and kind of petrified. So it's really not a big deal. Anyway, I won't talk about that too much. So I cooked dinner. It got really dark and washed off. Enjoyed full sky of stars, and just sort of musing that would be my last night on the CDT. Next morning, Commander went by me while I was packing up around 6 a.m. And then I took off and made it to the last water source that I would get to on the CDT. It was actually a really nice electric well. They called it an engineer's well. Had a little balloon that floats on the water in a tank. For livestock, and when the water balloon sort of gets down to a certain level, the pump is triggered and the pump turns on, and the tank gets filled back up. So that's pretty cool. And while I was getting water, Jerry caught up to me. It was kind of funny. He was on the wrong side of a fence, so couldn't get to the water source, and I felt a little bad for him because he had to walk back probably half a mile to go through the gate to get on the side of the fence I was on. So I sort of said goodbye to him there. He was an interesting guy. He was also a vet of 30 years, and he was in his 60s. He'd broken both legs in a car accident only 18 months earlier. And he was a local. He lived in New Mexico. Said he loved it. So originally my plan was to stay in Lordsburg again at the Econo Lodge after I got to town. But on that last day, I started to wonder if I could get there in time to catch a bus or a train and just basically go straight to El Paso or straight to the airport almost. So it looked like I might make a bus if I basically started jogging. And it's always fun to have a challenge. So I just really started pushing it. I cut a couple corners in the desert by slipping under a few fences and trespassing across some flat desert cattle land. There's a few young bulls who weren't too happy about that, but they were easy to drive away. Long story short, I made it to town with time to spare, about half an hour to spare, and passed Commander on Route 90 on the way in. He'd been trying to hitch, and no one was picking him up. He looked pretty forlorn. He has a pretty wild look to him, so I guess not surprising that that no one was picking up. Yeah, so that's it. I made it to town, and as I crossed the train tracks where I'd been dropped off, week or so before, yeah, that was the official moment that I completed all the miles on the CDT and got my Triple Crown. So I made a little video to commemorate it, but it's much less interesting than the one I made at Crazy Cook. So that's going to be the one that I post on Facebook. And the Greyhound bus back to El Paso left from McDonald's parking lot, so I headed over there, changed into town clothes in the back, and cleaned up in the bathroom a bit, and met a couple other hikers who just got their Triple Crowns as well. 2 guys in their 20s, one really nice guy, and he was actually the guy who hiked in sandals past me the other day. The other guy was a bit awkward and offered me a ride to El Paso, but then decided he didn't. He decided against it. Let's see, get back here. Right, and he was complaining about his shoes, and they were actually the same shoes that I used to wear before they caused my ankle tendon injury. So I was telling him, like, hey, you need to get out of those shoes, or I did my best to convince him to at least get his foot leveled out by going to I forget the name, the foot doctor. Yeah, if he was going to continue to use the zero drop shoes. So the bus schedule that I was scheduled to be on, it was a bit late, and I've been in that position before where they just never show up. So I weaseled my way onto a different bus that was going to El Paso also. And on that bus, there was only 3 people. So I had a really blissful, cruisy trip to El Paso. I gave the driver a $20 tip when we got there because he was so nice to kind of let me on. And when he pulled out of the parking lot, he blew me kisses through the window, which was really funny. Yeah, after that, it was somewhat brutal, 3-leg, overpriced, red-eye back to Boston. So yeah, the CDT is done. This part of the story is over. Maybe it's the, end of the, largest part of the story. So thanks to anyone who made it this far and has been following me all these years or just on the CDT. Hope everyone is well, and love out to everybody.